Retiring at 60 instead of 65 isn't just 5 fewer years of work. It changes how much you arrive at retirement with, how long your money needs to last, and how your investments need to work to support that. So let me walk you through what actually changes and what's worth thinking through before you make that call. When people think about retiring earlier, they usually focus on the upside. More time, more freedom. Doing what you want. And that's real. But what often gets missed is what changes financially underneath it. Because retiring 5 years earlier doesn't just bring things forward. It compresses everything. Your income window, your contribution period, your margin for error, all get tighter. And this is where it becomes important. Because on paper, 5 years doesn't sound like much. But in retirement, those 5 years can have an outsized impact. Let's start with super access. If you're retiring around 60, you're right at the point where super becomes available. That means you're likely moving from accumulation into pension phase. Now that sounds straightforward, but the timing matters. Because if you retire at 60, you're relying on that super immediately. If you retire at 65, you've had an extra 5 years of contributions and 5 years extra of growth. And this is something I see quite a lot in practice. People arrive at this decision thinking the gap between 60 and 65 is manageable. But when we actually run the numbers, the difference is consistently larger than they expected. Not because of the contributions alone, but because of the compounding. Those last 5 years are often when balances are at their highest. So even normal market returns have a much bigger dollar impact. Now layer on tax. From 60 onwards, super income is generally tax-free. So whether you retire at 60 or 65, that part doesn't change much. But what does change is how long you need that tax-free income to last. If you retire at 60, your money might need to last 30 years. At 65, that might be 25 years. And that doesn't sound like a huge difference until you realize you're drawing income for 5 extra years. Let me give you a simple example. Say you need $80,000 a year. Those extra 5 years are $400,000 of withdrawals before you even get to the same starting point. And that's before we consider investment returns, market movement, or the 5 years less of contributions and compounding growth. This is where investment strategy starts to shift. If you retire earlier, your portfolio has to do 2 things at once. It still needs to grow, but it also needs to provide income for longer. This creates tension. Because if you take too much risk, you expose yourself to volatility, especially early on. If markets fall early in retirement, that can have a lasting impact on how long your money lasts. That's what is known as sequence risk. And I've done a full video on this. I'll link it below if you want to go deeper on that one. But on the other side, if you're too conservative and don't take enough risk, your money may not grow enough to sustain those longer withdrawals. So you're balancing growth with income and stability over a longer period of time. And this is where most people underestimate the decision. They think, I'll just retire a bit earlier, without fully thinking through how that changes the structure underneath it. Let's bring this back to something practical. If you're sitting there thinking, should I retire at 60 or keep going to 65? What really matters isn't just whether you can, it's what that decision does to your plan over time. So the questions I'd actually be asking are these. How much income do you actually need? And does that change as you move through retirement? Does your portfolio have enough in it to support 30 years of withdrawals, not just the first 5? What happens to your plan if markets fall in year 1 or 2? And how much flexibility do you have to adjust if things don't go exactly as expected? Because retiring earlier isn't just about having enough today. It's about whether that decision still works 10, 15, 20 years from now. Because what most people get wrong is they treat retirement as a point in time, when in reality, it's a long sequence of decisions. And the earlier you start that sequence, the more important those decisions become. This is general in nature, so it's important to consider your own situation. But if you're weighing up 60 versus 65, don't just think about the date. Think about what changes underneath it and whether your plan adjusts with it. If you're approaching retirement and want structured guidance rather than figuring this out alone, I work with Australians in exactly that position. You can find details below.